my name is Liselotte Engstam. I'm the chair of Board's Impact Forum. And today we're delighted to run this webinar together with the Scandinavian Executive Institute. And we are, of course, also delighted to have such an interesting discussion. We think that it's important that we as board members actually start to get a bit of grip on how to integrate sustainability and actually make it part of our business and not keep it too separate. And for that, we have arranged this amazing webinar. Can we take the next slide? And the moderator for today will be Fernanda Torre, which is the operations director at Board's Impact Forum and also a board member herself. And we are, of course, delighted to have Pia Heidenmark Cook, Julie Baddeley, and Lars Husberg here with us to discuss together with you. And they will be introduced very shortly. Next slide, please. So the agenda for today is that we are going to have a presentation on how to embed sustainability to drive organizational transformation that will be held by Pia. And then we will follow that up with a panel with Pia and Julie and Lasse and a discussion moderated by Fernanda. After that, we will have a poll with you all joining here. And following that, we will have a peer exchange in breakout rooms where you will discuss the topic with fellow board colleagues. Coming back from that, we will have some feedback and we will have the panel discussing together with you the insights from today and how we can accelerate our value creation. And after that, we will have a conclusion and next time. So if we can take the next slide, we have a little short etiquette, and that is that you are muted. We would appreciate if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat box. You don't have to. The first part of this webinar with the presentation and the moderation will be recorded. The rest of the webinar will not be shared, so the breakout rooms and the follow-up discussion will not be shared. But we will create both a recording but also a blog post based on this. So warm welcome, introduce yourself in the chat box, avoid marketing, you know the drill. So let's go on to the core of the webinar. We just want to say that we always put this, if you can take the entire slide, we put this in the context of the 8 principles of climate governance that World Economic Forum established together with the Climate Governance Initiative. And in this case, it's very much on the core focus is very much on the principles around 4 and 5, how to really get this integrated. So that's where we will spend most of the time today. Now, let's get on to the core of the presentation. Over to you, Fernanda.
Exactly. Without further ado, let's get to know what Pia has to tell us. So for those of you who don't know Pia, she has a brilliant career within Chief Sustainability Officer at IKEA, and her latest mandates within boards have been at Bupa, Max Burgers, Origin Materials. Pia has a really interesting background because when she was in IKEA, she was also in the executive team. So she really has very hands-on experience being in the executive team, leading sustainability and bringing it to the board. And with all that amazing experience, Pia has written a book that we are also going to mention later on. So Pia has been named one of the top 10 female leaders in sustainability and one of the top 5 influencers on climate change. So it's really a great pleasure to have Pia here with us today. Please take it away, Pia.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Liselotte and Fernanda for inviting me. So next slide, please. And I'm really happy to be able to share a bit about the book, which is you could say like a handbook for CSOs, where I, together with a former colleague of mine from IKEA, Lisa, kind of tried to collect some of the learnings and reflections from my 25 years leading sustainability in companies. And that was often, it was often when I left IKEA, I often got the question, what did you learn? What's your takeaways? And how did you go about this and that? And a lot of questions on the how, not so much on the why, because I think people kind of know the why now, and the what, and sometimes, but not so much, but really on the how did you do it? So that's why we decided to put things together in this book. So next slide. And with the book, we were also fortunate to have Ryan, who's the CEO of Patagonia, to write the foreword, together with Maria Mandelucci, who is the CEO of We Mean Business, which is a climate advocacy coalition. And what Ryan, the feedback we got from Ryan when he read the book was that he appreciated that we're working very clearly in the book and trying to really show examples of how to go about it, integrating sustainability in all kinds of roles, because one of the firm beliefs we have in the book, and as people, is that sustainability is not the role of the chief sustainability officer or head of sustainability. It's really everyone's job. And then we're also focusing a lot around leadership, how you create this change, because I think one of my aha moments when I was chief sustainability officer was that as much as I had to understand the science and understand the kind of technical nature of the job, I was fundamentally a change manager. So my job was about creating change in the organization. Next slide. And then kind of taking a bit of the world around us, and it's just weird how fast things change, because we wrote the book last year. So I actually sent it to the editor around this time a year ago. And sometimes when I look at the book now, I feel like, gosh, so much has changed in that just 1 year. So we are truly living in a VUCA world. It's volatile, it's complex, and it's fast moving. So, I mean, just some things that we as board members have to reflect on is and take into consideration when we sit on boards and help to lead companies, is really what's happening in the tech space, what's happening in the economy and politics, and also geopolitical situation, of course. And there's been a lot of change. I mean, there's not been a year since the Second World War where there's been this many armed conflicts outside country borders. So it is kind of it's not just the wars that we hear about on the news all the time. There's a lot of them going on right now. This was also the year of elections. So a lot of people, half the world's population, went to the poll. But it's also the year of a continued trend that's happened over the last 10, 15 years, where we are moving away from democratic ruling, and more leaders are kind of swearing into a more autocratic leadership style. And then, of course, we have had, since COVID, kind of a cost of living crisis, where, for example, in Europe, 20% of Europeans are working poor. So they have a job, a full-time job, they still can't make both ends meet. And then, of course, we are not just polarizing in political views, but also in kind of pockets and wealth, where the richest 1% own 45% of the world's wealth. And then, of course, with AI, with the huge, I would say, exponential growth that's happening in AI, where also I saw a report just last week where a lot of climate tech funds as an investment opportunity now is shifting more and more towards AI. So there is almost like this competition for money between AI and climate right now. But I'll end there, and then next slide, please, Fernanda. And then, of course, if I just zoom in on the environmental bit, and I'm not going to go into a long stretch on all the things going on. This is just kind of a quick summary. But it's just interesting when I was choosing a photo for this slide, there's just so many to choose from right now because there's been so many environmental disasters in the last half year. And this year is the warmest on record, and we seem to be heading for reaching above 1.5 degrees for the first time this year. So 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have been crossed. The World Wildlife Foundation came out with their wildlife report just a bit of over a month ago, where the average size of wildlife populations have fallen by 73% between 1971 and 2020. That's it's just going so fast. But then also this report above on the 12% decline in world GDP is actually one of the first time where a research institute have put together global GDP, not just looking at country by country, but like extrapolating it on global GDP, where they could see that every 1% increase in global temperature will actually lead to a 12% decline in world GDP because of, for example, supply chain disruptions and so on. Next slide. So all of that is kind of the world around us and that we need to take in as a board member. But before I zoom in on the company and what we do and need to do in organizations, it's just useful to reflect on the roles that we can play as individuals. So of course there are 4 roles that we can play, and there's a lot of focus on the consumer, like what choose with your wallet and kind of give directions with your wallet. But also as owners, what do we choose to do with our pension money, or where do we choose to invest is an important part. And then, of course, as a citizen, who do we vote for? How do we engage in the community? How do we turn up as citizens? But then, of course, as employees, where a lot of our waking hours are actually in our jobs. So how do we bring about a sustainability change at the work? So that's what I talk more about. And as I said, one question I often got when leaving IKEA was, why did IKEA start so early with sustainability? What were my main reflections on that? So this is very much my reflections on why we started early at IKEA. And one big thing and what big driver was the purpose of IKEA, and that it's a purpose-led organization. So the culture where caring or being mindful of wasting resources is actually one of the key values was an important driver. So making a comparison and understanding of environment and wasting resources, and also the ability for IKEA to be the low-cost company that it is, and creating affordable furniture for people was very much based on not wasting resources. And then in terms of the vision to create a better everyday life for the many people, it just goes beyond home furnishings, and that is a very clear driver for a lot of employees working at IKEA. Then clarity of crisis and S-curve. When we started to build up the sustainability team and the sustainability strategy, we spent a lot of time on research and understanding the outside in. So very much an outside in, also trying to do foresight scenarios, understanding what would climate change mean for our supply chain, what would water scarcity mean for supply chain, where did we see customer demands coming and changing, etc., etc. So very much of a outside-in view into the company. And then competitiveness and growth, where especially in the last 5 years, we saw an increase in demand from customers and an increased awareness of understanding that home furnishings has an impact on the environment and on the social side. So people kind of connecting the dots much more, that this product is coming from somewhere, someone has put in efforts to produce it and resources have been used. But then also from a more long-term perspective, and kind of where we started out was very much on cost and risk reduction, to really make sure that we were smart with resources and we understood the risks in the supply chain. So those were kind of some of the reasons why IKEA decided to start early with sustainability. Next slide. And when it comes to this kind of understanding the world around us, and the first strategy, the People and Planet Positive strategy, was from 2011. So really starting to see, and you see 2010 is where these kind of exponential growth curves really started to set in. And understanding exponential growth is really hard because we kind of tend to think linear. But when it comes to solar and wind and EVs and now also increasingly battery, there is that exponential change curve. And I think one of my best examples on this is we decided to start investing in renewable energy in 2009, so put aside 2 billion euro to invest in renewables, and not buying renewable electricity certificates, but actually buying wind parks and solar parks and owning and operating them. And that was very much kind of betting on that the world will need renewable energy, and we knew we needed energy to run our operations. So we decided to actually own what we saw as an important resource for our business success. Next slide. Another of these exponential curves, but in another direction down, is actually the cost. So the cost of wind, solar, and battery is dramatically going down. And that, of course, is why we see an increasing uptake. So we are kind of in the middle of a clean tech boom, so to say, even if it feels like it's slowing down a little bit right now. If you extrapolate, we are still in a very exponential growth situation. Next slide. And with this exponential growth, I mean, another thing we have in exponential growth is, of course, the amount of CO2 equivalents in the atmosphere. But with this change that we see, and if it's in battery, solar, or other more clean tech solutions or climate tech solutions, there's often this phase of disappointment where you feel like the barriers are just too big and it takes so much time to create this change. But then once you really start to see the disruption and the change, it just takes off. So it's just sometimes important to remember when you, and it doesn't have to be sustainability. This is kind of a change management curve. But when you feel like I keep working on it and it's not really moving, you are probably in that phase of disappointment before it really taps off and you get to the tipping point where things start to move. Next slide. And then again, on the how, what were the learnings on how we went about to create this change within IKEA? And I'm not saying IKEA is done by any means. Like any other company, they're on a journey towards implementing more ambitious sustainability strategies. But one was ambition. Ambition in the sense of understanding what it takes to really drive sustainability across the whole value chain. And also deciding quite early that we set goals of 100%, because when it's difficult goals, if you say 90% or 80%, there's always a business unit or a geographical unit that kind of says, oh, I'm going to be the 10%, so I'll wait and see what happens. With 100%, it's very clear that the whole organization needs to change. Another key principle for IKEA is about accountability and ability. So integrating sustainability in everyone's job profile. So no matter where you worked within the company, we integrate the sustainability into the tasks of that team. And with that also came the ability, because it's not really fair to say you are responsible to make this happen if that is building more sustainable stores or selling more sustainable products or developing more sustainable products if you don't provide the tools and the ability for the team to actually make that change. Another key principle was around agency and agility. I meet a lot of companies today that say we don't have the perfect amount of data or the perfect data set. We don't have all the answers. It's so unclear in the world around us. We're just going to wait and see, and we're going to wait until it's a bit more perfect. We don't really have that time. So agency is, we need to start to change now, and we need to learn as we go. And that's why agility is so important, because we need to test and learn and fail. And when we fail, take the learnings and then go back up it and improve. And then it's about advocacy. It's about speaking up on topics that are important to you and really working across the value chain and in the communities, way beyond your own four walls. So sustainability needs to be bigger than just your company. Next slide. I'm sorry. I just have a cold, so that's why my throat is a bit off. Another thing when it comes to integration and embedding sustainability, it's important that it's not only the people side that I mentioned now and integrating it into the jobs functions, but it's also about integrating it into the organization. So sustainability is fundamentally about what you choose to do as a company. Which products do you choose to sell? Which supply chain are you setting up? Who are the suppliers you work with? Who are the customers that you're working with? And other business partners. So it's very much around the business model of your organization and then the people of your organization, how you choose to go about your business. So those two are key elements when you talk about embedding sustainability in the organization. Next slide. And as I said, it's very much around change management, and change management is difficult. And one reason why it's difficult is that we sit on a lot of vested interest and a lot of systems that we have built over time. And a lot of people that needs to create this change are the ones that are benefiting from the system as it is. And it's really difficult to understand it when you kind of depend on it continuing to work the way it's always worked. And it's important to have that with you. So when you meet people and you discuss sustainability on the board level, in management team, or out in society, is what's in it for you, what's in it for people, and what do they feel like they have to lose by changing. Next slide. And then here's just quickly working through the book, the chapters of the book, which is kind of a summary of how I see you go about it. It's fundamentally about assessing where you are as an organization, understanding your purpose, either kind of connecting sustainability to your existing purpose or redefining your purpose, being really clear of why are you here? What is your contribution to the world? Why is the world a better place having you around? Organization and integration, getting it really embedded into the organization, stakeholder, understanding the stakeholders you have around you and how they can be part of the journey with you, reporting, and then advocacy and communication, and then kind of again understanding the world around you, and just kind of keep going in this loop of working through the different aspects of sustainability. Next slide. And then one of my final comments, I think it's important to remember that when implementing or working with sustainability, it's very much around the kind of hardcore. So on the previous slide with the steps, it's very much around management. It's setting goals, having roadmaps, following up, being really clear on what you're going to do, building business cases, sound business cases. But it is also about leadership. And I would say even more so about leadership. It's about authentic leadership. It's daring to be vulnerable. It's about being brave and courageous, daring to stick out your neck, even though it's a bit uncertain or the business case has a lot of variables or uncertainties in it. It's around storytelling, your purpose, your vision, and being able to paint that picture of this is where we're heading, this is why we're heading here, and this is what it will look like once we get there. So that kind of getting people with you, at least my belief and what I've seen, is hard to get that only with the kind of hard wiring. You need the soft wiring, and that's where you have leadership as a driver for that. So that was my last. Yes, next slide. In case you want to buy the book, I just put a discount code here so that you can find it on cokeandpage.com, and then with the code you get a 20% discount. So thank you, and looking forward to the panel with the others.
Thank you so much, Pia. That was really, really interesting. I'll just let this on for a few seconds so people can take the codes. Let's move then into the panel discussion. So let me welcome here both Julie Baddeley and Lars Husberg. So, Julie, it's a great honor to have you here with us today. For those of you who don't know Julie, she is the chair from the Climate Governance Initiative, which is kind of the umbrella organization to each board's impact forum belongs. So it's very good to have you here with us today. And Julie has also an amazing experience within boards, within governance, with more than 20 years. And she was the chair of the global recruitment company, Harvey Nash. And she has an amazing portfolio also as an executive. Welcome so much, Julie. Also together with us here today, we have Lars, that we have had the honor to also have engaged with us here at Boards Impact Forum for quite a few years now. So Lasse has been kind of following the work at Boards Impact Forum, and he's a chairman on the board of 3 private and family-owned companies in Finland, and also has a very long experience within management. So welcome to you both. And let me kick off the conversation here by picking up on something that Pia brought up. Pia was making the point about the different roles that we can have, both as citizens, but also within the organization. And I wanted to start by you, Lasse, and your experience working with family-owned companies. And I'm wondering, how do you work with owners in order to bring their attention about this need to integrate business and sustainability? How have you been able to do that balance?
Well, it actually
Fernanda,
all
maybe
started.
can I just interrupt? Fernanda, maybe you want to take away the chart so we can see people.
Good point.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. How have we done it? Of course, as also listening to Pia, it all starts with the big questions, with the strategy process, and also, I mean, we have to look at the strategy from outside in this today's business environment, and also to get a perspective, we have to look far enough into the future. So we have been using future and foresight tools in order then to let's say start the discussion for renewal and big bet decisions in the companies. And when we have used these tools, we have built future pictures. And interestingly, one of 3 future pictures in these companies have been with the headline "Sustainability as a new value creator." So that discussion already brought up sustainability. And in the working groups, we have combined owners, board members, and extended management discussing the future. And this has been new for everyone. And the future is, of course, unknown for all. So we could all forget our traditional opinions and positions. And no one really knowing the business well could really dominate the discussion. So it was very, very fruitful discussions looking into the future and identifying sustainability as a value creator, then fueling the innovation. So actually the outcome of this has been then that we have different future pictures and assumptions that we constantly follow these assumptions, some of those related then to sustainability questions. And then we assess opportunity and threats, growth plans, and risk profiles. And then we build different scenarios for the companies and strategic choices for renewal and transformation, including then sustainability-driven innovations. And what was really interesting was that we tested these future pictures also with our customers to check if they share our views of the future. And really the takeout was that when the people came back and said, well, wow, we are doing great things because we are much further ahead than our customers in thinking about these strategic things into the future, and also including sustainability. So So this was a way to get all the stakeholders involved in really understanding the impact of, let's say, sustainability of the business's competitiveness in the future and need for innovation. And this, of course, also changed then management to rolling budgeting, portfolio management, and adaptive and dynamic strategic thinking.
Super. Music to my ears. As soon as you start talking about future thinking, foresight, that's exactly the kind of tools that I think we definitely need to use more at the board level. But also picking up a bit on what you were saying about kind of working with stakeholders and making this across the organization and then also within the ecosystem. I wanted to now kind of turn to you, Julie, and I know that you are also very interested kind of making sustainability kind of everyone's business in the organization and making sure that this is kind of not just the job of a few persons, and also kind of putting this into a bigger transition plan. Okay, how do we actually make it work? Can you share a few of your insights and of your learnings within how to make it work from a board perspective at an organization?
Yes, of course. And I mean, a lot of what Pia said really resonates with me. I mean, all the language is very much what we're trying to work with when we're working with boards, to do with, courage and making this part of everybody's role. And like Pia, my bulk of my executive career was in change management. So I very much also would echo that the good techniques that we tried to use in business transformation are absolutely the right ones for this particular challenge, which is probably the biggest challenge, actually, I have to say, that I've faced in my career working with companies and boards. So the idea that this needs to be led from the top, but also from the bottom, and all sides, and integrated through all functions of a business, just as any other transformation does, is absolutely key. So one of the top-down tools that we have is planning for the transition and strategy. Yeah. And so when I work with the boards, I very much have been thinking about how do we create a transition plan. And I was privileged to be part of what was called the Transition Plan Task Force, which actually completed its work last Thursday. So it's very, very recent. It was a UK government-sponsored piece of work. And what it built over 2 years was a model for how to do transition planning that encompassed both emissions reduction and adaptation and nature, and dealing with a just transition, and looking at a company's broader influence over the whole system that it's working within, rather than just within its organization. So I would commend anyone who's on the call to look at the TPT framework, because it is not just, although it's called a disclosure framework, it's not just about reporting, it's very much about how you go about doing a transition plan. And the thing that I always say when I'm talking to our, in the UK, 3,000 members, globally over 100,000 members of our climate board network, is you won't get anywhere without ambition, but you won't deliver ambition without a plan. So, I'm very much of the school that says we need to set that 100% ambition that Pia was talking about, because without that, we won't drive the change. But equally, we need those shorter term milestones in the plan to get there. And the Transition Plan Task Force, TPT frameworks very much look at how to go about that. It's more a guide than a framework. And it also has sort of sector specific elements to deal with some of the really hard to deal with aspects of this change. So I think it is about leadership, and in the face of the external environment that we're now working with, Pia, that you talked about on your slide, we need courage more than ever as leaders, because it's very easy at the moment to get knocked back a bit by the rhetoric that's out there, or the sort of challenges that are coming in. And just a final point before I hand back, one of the things about change management work that you, I know, will recognize is that it's easy to set the ambition, but it's actually only when you start to do the delivery that you come across all the barriers. And I think we're very much in that slightly disappointment phase that you had on your slide, where companies have said, you know, we will get to net zero by 2030, 2035, 2040. But actually, they're now in that phase of realizing that it's not, you know, there are a lot of things that get in the way. They might be the entrenched views of people whose jobs depend on the past, but there might also be the uncertainties around the future that you're planning for. There's so many barriers. And the only way we overcome those is to keep driving forward.
That's a very good point. If you allow me to just keep kind of on that topic for a little bit. Pia was talking about this VUCA world, so high volatility, uncertainty, very complex, all the challenges that are coming. And I guess that this is also a question kind of general for everyone in the panel, which is, how can we make boards stay kind of on that positive, courageous, ambitious mindset framework, but yet also realistic, that we can really kind of make this integration. Yeah, I know that this is the $1 million question, right? This is really kind of the holy grail. But you know, from your experiences, maybe I'll start with you now, Pia. How do you think that and maybe we can even share some of your experience at IKEA, some of the things that were happening there, kind of this integration and keep it courageous, kind of with a positive twist somehow.
I'll see, Fernanda, how I can answer the $1 million question. One thing that comes to mind when you were asking and talking is somehow success breeds success. So one of the early learnings we had, and maybe also connected to what I said on not going for perfection, but get started. One thing I felt when we started to really break through and it became a movement internally was because we had succeeded with a lot of pilot projects and we had done a lot of things. So some of the barriers that you were mentioning, Julie, was almost like people felt like, but it's possible. Like we managed this, we managed that. And it could be anything from circular innovation projects to energy efficiencies projects in the store, or new design principles in the supply chain or in product development. So somehow kind of cutting up the elephant into manageable pieces, and also managing your sustainability organization because they want to do more and bigger and faster. But understanding that it's difficult to jump on the huge thing and change everything at the same time. You kind of do it by doing. So that's one. So success breeds success. Another one, to build on what Julie was saying, there's something in, or I felt like once we really got sustainability into the business plan, the annual business plan, I mean, we had the strategy that was 2020 first and then to 2030. But once it got into the business plan, then we started to talk budget and choices, like, shall we do more of this or less of that? That was also kind of one of these game changers. So I think there's a lot of those. The work of the board is to set the strategy and help set the strategy, and keep the management team and the organization responsible and accountable for that strategy, but even when it's hard. So even when it requires money, and I think to stick to that, like to be creative. I mean, you can't be creative with finances, and it sounds like I'm suggesting other things when it comes to money. But one learning I had from IKEA was also like really understanding what the barriers were. And sometimes it was working on a unit level, the store, to find money or to allocate money to 5 to 10 year payback projects was hard. So, but if we pool that money for energy efficiency projects, for example, through the real estate budget, the global real estate budget, all of a sudden we kind of took away 400 individual store managers' decision, and it was between me, the CFO, and the head of real estate, and it became much more manageable. So it's just that kind of working with the organization and really understanding what the true barriers are, and can you find creative new ways of overcoming those barriers.
Which I think is also very, very much connected to the point that Lasse was making previously, also with the value creation, right? So kind of making it concrete. I really like what you said about putting it kind of into chunks, smaller aspects that you can actually have quick wins on. I guess it's also change management principle, but also kind of this showing the value that of what you're doing. I'm wondering, let's say, if you have any more good examples of that kind of value creation as a way to kind of integrate sustainability within the organizations that you are part of the board.
Well, I think there are two aspects regarding understanding and knowledge. First of all, I think the boards have to truly understand the business of the company much better than any time before, to really understand the impact of sustainability or AI or all these disruptions. And we need more frequent board meetings. We cannot just meet 6 to 8 times a year. So, well, we don't have to be like venture capitalists who have every week a board meeting, but actually we have to be active. And then I think that we have to, especially strong stakeholders like owners, the chair of the board, the CEO, we have to align so that, and we have to be curious, and we have to educate ourselves so we can take, let's say, a visible role in initiating the discussions. So I think these are the two things that I've been actively working with to get this going on.
Very good point. Thank you so much for sharing. I just see here a question in the chat that I thought was actually very interesting, slightly provocative, that I will bring it up now. Does the courage that the leaders need to have also includes courage to sacrifice growth and profits? Less consumption lead to less growth, more investments in green solutions still cost more than conventional, etc. Any thoughts on that courageous? A lot of us kind of were bringing up that being courageous. What do you think about that question? Maybe I'll start with you, Julie. Is courage about sacrifice also in terms of growth and profits?
I think it's a really, really interesting question, this, and it comes back to your point actually that you were making earlier about how should the board approach this issue. So if you fundamentally believe that the change in the climate and the impacts that it's having is an inescapable truth, which I do. I mean, I still don't, in spite of all the things in the press about fires in America and floods in Valencia, I still don't think that, generally speaking, the public at large really understands the direction we're going in with all of this. And for those of us who've been a bit steeped in the science and seen that future, if you believe that, then you have to accept that sustainability of our companies and our economy depends on getting this right. So you might have to sacrifice some short-term profit. You might have to take on some big capital investments that you hadn't intended possibly to do at this point, in order to protect that long-term viability. In the UK listed environment, we have in our annual report, we have to put in what they call a long-term viability statement. And if you look at those statements, hardly any of them take account of this issue. You know, it's called a long-term viability statement, but actually a company picks to do 3 years, and they don't really look out into the real future. So I think that you've got to accept the fact that there are multiple forces driving this change when you're in the board. You've got the inevitability of the physical risks that we're going to face. And with that comes massive increases in insurance costs, which sounds a bit sort of pragmatic, but, it is a big issue. And not only costs, but the amount you have to take on yourself in terms of risk. I mean, I had a company recently where the deductibles, as they call it, the amount the company has to pay before the insurer steps in is $20 million. I mean, that, you're not really being insured if you've got a £20 million deductible. So you've got all of that. You've got pressure from customers. I mean, one of my boards, our customer is government. Government has very big and stringent targets on all of this. So, we cannot get away from it. We have to take account of that pressure. You've got employees who are feeling, the young and the talented young are really focused on this and seeing that their organization is actually doing the right thing. And investors, well, I mean, I know that Lasse is on a private company board, and I am too, and that's a slightly different situation. If you're in the listed sector, it is tough because there's mixed messages, which I think is the root of this question, which is that, you've got investors who on the one hand say they want us to do all of this in the right way, but in the meantime, they also want quarterly earnings to be where they like them to be. So one final point is, this is a combination of threat and opportunity. We have to really look at it through both lenses. I mean, there is no doubt there's a massive opportunity here. There's going to be huge investment. I mean, one of my companies is a global manufacturer, and it's absolutely pushing the electric vehicle transition. That's its big opportunity. And for almost all companies, there are opportunities coming out of this, but there is also this risk aspect. And I think as a board, you have to be looking at it through both lenses. And sometimes that might mean a short-term sacrifice in growth. But I mean, controversially, I would say that growth to some degree has got us to the problem that we're in, but not good growth, but growth with waste, which was one of Pia's earlier points.
I think that's a very, very good answer. Thank you so much, Julie. Lasse, is it different if you're in a family-owned company? This idea about what you sacrifice and being courageous, or is it different in that context, or not really?
Well, no, not really. It's very much traditionally family-owned companies have had, let's say, ethical things and business conduct and HR as part of their purpose. So the values have resonated with sustainability, though they might then have, let's say, opinions or ignorance or stuff like that. And one example is in a company that they say that they want to spend minimum amount of money to do minimum compliance. And then we accidentally found out that our CO2 footprint was 1/3 of our competitor because of cleaner energy. And we had missed that opportunity for many years. And then I have a good friend who's in a business where they are galvanizing, and what they did, they closed down 4 factories and built the greenest galvanizing factory in Europe. A 30 million business made a 20 million investment because they believed in this. So I think it's really that maybe family-owned companies, they really haven't understood this, and they have their legacy and all that, and they don't have the resources or ambition. So there's a lot of training and that type of things we need to do with family-owned smaller companies.
Opportunity is there also.
Yeah, a lot of opportunities.
I think it's maybe time that we go into our poll, so that we also have a bit of time to discuss in breakout rooms. So let me just share my screen again. And so that we can go now into the poll. You are supposed to see the poll. It was just launched. So we would ask you to vote from your perspective within the board. Is our organization's board effectively integrating sustainability with the core business strategy? That's the first question. And the second question, do you feel that the board that you are at possesses the necessary expertise to guide and oversee sustainability integration into the strategy? So if you're kind of doing it, but also if there's the necessary capability and competence. And I'm just going to wait a few seconds here to give you some time to answer. Just a few more seconds. We have a few persons that have answered. Okay, maybe we can share the poll now. So do you see the poll results as it is now?
Yes.
Super. So I would like to ask our panel very quickly also, before we go into breakout rooms, to comment the results. So does our board effectively integrate sustainability into the core business strategy? 69% here agree, and a bit maybe less clear the second question about the competence. Some neutral, some agree also. Pia, do you want to comment the results of the poll? What are your thoughts?
I mean, positive to see that it's 70%. I think that's really good to see. Often I feel like we do these polls and we're more negative when we're anonymous. So good to see. Maybe being a devil's advocate, sometimes I think it really depends on what we mean by really integrating sustainability into the business, because I still see very few incumbents, not small startups that have kind of started with the SDGs in mind, but that have fully integrated sustainability into the full business strategy and the full business model. So are we really producing products or services that meet the SDGs and enable the SDGs rather than yet another cool product that the world maybe doesn't need? So I think it a little bit puts in what we put into this, but it's still very positive to see that many feel like we are starting to integrating it, and it's not just the job of the sustainability manager. And then for the second one, I didn't, there we go. But that's also very positive. I guess maybe a lot of people who are on this call are here for a reason. They're interested and informed already. I would say again that my experience is that it's a mixed bag where people know what climate change is, but now if we start to connect nature, so the nexus between nature, climate, and people, that becomes more difficult. Biodiversity, what does it mean for organizations? How do we address it? So the latest COP in South America is more difficult, and the whole S side of sustainability, how do you measure that and really measure progress and impact? So I think it's a bit, yeah, where are you answering from, but still very positive to see. So that's my reflection.
Absolutely. Julie, what are your thoughts? I'm thinking also here about the second question about kind of the expertise from the board. What are your thoughts, and also looking into the result?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Pia said, that it doesn't surprise me that not that many people think that it is fully integrated into their strategy. I think if they did, they probably don't see what a really integrated strategy is, because actually it's so fundamental if you can have every aspect of your business strategy looked at through this lens. So I think the 70% is great, and it was you know, it's a huge step forward from where we would have been when we launched our climate network in 2019, when I think it would have been a tiny number that would have said it was integrated, and they would have been in the energy business probably. On the competence and capability side, I think this is quite a challenge for board members. When I think back over my career on boards, there haven't been many areas where it's stretched our capability quite as much as this one does. There are many, many facets to this topic. And also there isn't always as good access to expertise, or there hasn't been, to expertise coming into the boardroom as there have been on lots of other strategic topics that we've dealt with over the years. So I think that in my boards, we have, in both the big companies, we have sustainability committees, and those board members go through a lot more training. They go into this in a lot more depth, and they spend a lot more time, so that when they bring things to the main board, that group of non-executive directors is already really well up to speed on this. I know that's, some people think there shouldn't be a committee and some think there shouldn't, but I found it really useful, because quite honestly, some of the expertise required is really, I've been working in this stuff now quite intensely for quite a long time, and it still really stretches my knowledge. So the poll, I should think, is a pretty accurate reflection of where things are.
Super, thank you so much. I think it's time that we move forward and go into the breakout room, so we have a bit of time also for discussion. So when you go now into the breakout rooms, we're going to assign you. Please decide on a chair to lead the discussion, and also a vice chair. We'll take a few notes about the discussion so that we can report back. When we are back, we are going to try to share a little bit of the discussions, or write it in the chat. So try to have a quick round of introductions, 1 minute each person, so that there's a bit of time for the discussion. And for the discussion, we would really appreciate if you could focus on how can we as a board effectively integrate sustainability with the core business and the core business strategy. Try to see if you can select and share a board practice. If you can identify a practice that we can also share here in the room. And we are going to have around 15 minutes for discussion, and then we will call you back. So see you in the breakout rooms.
So we have an amazing webinar coming up that we're running together with INSEAD, BCG, and Hydrogen Struggles. And it's on strategic governance for a disrupted world. And it's based on the survey around ESG that many of you have answered. So thank you for that. We have some amazing, interesting speakers on that. So join us for that. There's also a CGI webinar with the debrief of the current ongoing COP29. I know it's kind of feeling that a lot of boards, it's a bit out of our reach, but that will also guide a lot around the investments that might be happening or not happening, and what the impact of that is. And then check out our programs that we will be starting again from next year. Fernanda.
Super.
So we'll
Yes,
just
please.
thank you super much to Pia and Julie and Lasse for the generous sharing. And of course, for Scandinavian Executive Institute for sharing and supporting us. We would love if you could give us a little feedback on this session. So you can just take your phone, look at the camera, and then you will get into that. We will also send it out. So we'd love to get your feedback, and do join us or any other chapter of Climate Governance Initiative, which is normally free of charge. So you can continue to get the invites. For the ones that want to have some final conclusion, I think we can do that after this instead.
Super. But thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure to be here with us. And thank you again, to all the speakers, but also the participants. Please join us in our upcoming events.